Hello, everyone. This is Catherine Barnes, and I am so excited tonight because I am here with my good friend and bandmate in a great band called the Grey Cats. Her name is Kat Dishongh, and she's fucking awesome.
That's right. I do have a song I wrote called I'm Fucking Awesome. So
I
it's
love that song so much.
hard to deny. Hello, everyone.
So now that I've dropped an F-bomb, let's go and do this respectable interview here. So I would like to know about how you got started playing music in the first place.
I got started playing music in the first place because as a child, my parents thought I needed something to do. And to be a well-rounded child, they introduced piano when I was before kindergarten, like really little, just learning the basics of piano. And then slowly through the years, they started introducing more instruments. In third grade, I got that guitar, which was really, really large for me as a full-sized guitar as a child. And slowly learned how to play that. And then that same year was signed up for voice lessons. So I started singing when I was, well, like in a choir when I was 7. And now I'm 27 and I've been singing the whole time pretty much nonstop. So yeah, and throughout I've done like a bunch of musicals and I like the acting aspect of it too, although the singing definitely I need to cover my horrible acting skills. Uh, and I've played in a few bands, but the Grey Cats, the band that I'm in with Catherine, is by far the most fun band that I've been in so far.
Well, that's good. I'm glad we're not a total drag because that would suck. Was your family at all musical?
Yes, yes and no. My mom was musical. She like was always singing to us as a kid, and my dad was tone deaf. And so when I started playing music, he started practicing guitar for an hour every day. And so he's now 20 years for an hour every day, and he can pass as not being tone deaf.
Okay. Well, that's cool that you inspired him to do that. Now, right now in our band, we're playing a lot of Irish music to get ready for our St. Patrick's Day gig at the Irish American Bar Association's party. And you were mentioning that you'd learned a lot of those songs from your dad, or that they were songs that he liked to sing.
Yeah, growing up, my dad incorporated a lot of Irish music, like traditional music. We like always had it playing in the house or randomly, like when he took us to soccer or like to school, there was always Irish music playing, mostly because he was a really big fan of the Chieftains. But then we moved to Ireland when I was in third grade, and then we moved back when I was in seventh grade. So while I was in Ireland, I sang in the Irish National Children's Choir, and we did a lot of songs there too. And that was what made me actually learn Irish. Before we would just like kind of bastardize it, our understandings.
Wow. Okay. So moving to Ireland in the third grade, tell us about what that was like for you.
It was really cool. It was really a really fun experience. I'd been to Catholic schools in the US, and so it was pretty seamless transition going to public school in Ireland because you still had the uniforms, the Catholicism, all the joys of Catholic school in the US. What I was not expecting is that secondary school, like in Ireland, there's primary school and secondary school. Primary is 1 through 6, and secondary is American 7 through 12.
Mm-hmm.
But they just started over again. So it's 1 through 6, 1 through 6.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started secondary school, it was kind of a trip to be like 12 and in the same school as 18-year-olds. I was not ready for that transition, but they put us in lovely little, like if you've seen Harry Potter, like houses. And mine was Spideog, which means robin in Irish.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for our talent show, we did Rock and Spideog as audition.
Doesn't have quite the same ring, but I like the creativity.
Yeah. Super Spideog probably would have been better, but
that's cool. So you've talked about an Irish word here. So did you have any language barrier at all? Did you have to learn Irish? What was that like?
So in Ireland, they speak English with an accent, but it's still the same language for the most part. But there's, hesitate to say the language is dead because it's very much alive. There's little, I hope I'm not being laughed at over there with that statement, but there's little pockets of Ireland called Gaeltachts where they only speak Irish as like a way to bring back the language, and all the street signs are in Irish and then in English.
Hmm.
Also as kind of like a middle finger to the British in some respects, I'm sure. Uh, but we didn't we didn't have a language barrier, but we were required to learn it in schools. My brother's biggest barrier was asking to go to the restroom because you couldn't go to the restroom unless you asked in Irish. So he came home one day to my dad just absolutely in tears. And my dad's like, "What's wrong, buddy? Like, how are you liking school?" He's like, "Dad, they won't let me use the bathroom. I really had to poop today and I couldn't go. And it's because I didn't know how to ask in Irish." And my dad's like, "Oh, okay, okay." So my dad works at Intel. He calls his intern who's Irish and is like, "Hey, how do you say, 'Can I go to the bathroom' in Irish?" And she told him, and he wrote it down phonetically for my brother. And he put it in his pocket, went to school. And he comes home the next day just like so happy. And my dad's like, "How'd it go? Did you go to the bathroom?" And he was like, "Yeah, Dad, I don't even have to say it in Irish anymore." And Dad's like, "Okay, well, how'd you say it?" He's like, he pulls out his little piece of paper. "Oh, Will, the cat is dumb. I gotta go pee on lettuce." And it's Unville Catagum Golgandian Letters. So he was close, but when my brother was little, he thought other languages were just English with an accent, and like the words meant different things. So that's was a good way for me to remember it, at least too. I was like, "Oh, okay."
Wait. So it's "Oh, Will."
"Oh, Will, the cat is dumb. I gotta go pee on lettuce."
"Oh, Will, the cat is dumb. I gotta go pee on lettuce."
Which sounds pretty close to Unville Catagum Golgandian Letters.
And you've been using something kind of like that to help us learn the songs that we're doing in Grey Cats right now. Like I've been walking around going, "Shake a leg, my yellow dog."
Yeah, that's another one of my wonderful brother's Irishisms, for lack of a better word.
So he's the source of those.
Yes, in his beautiful child mind.
That's
Now,
really awesome.
yeah, I wish that he had more of them because those are the only two that I remember to this day, but they were good little phrases to remember.
Those are pretty epic. What was the reason that you guys moved to Ireland in the first place? Just cuz or
Well, my dad, he's does like sensor inventions, for lack of a better word. Like he's an engineer. So he was working on a project called, I don't remember what it was called, but it was basically so that people with Alzheimer's could live in their home
Hmm.
after they had Alzheimer's, but they didn't have to have assistive care. So it was like sensors underneath seats to see how long someone was sitting,
Mhm.
like they're sitting for too long, pill bottles. And like the first smartwatch was my dad's, and it had the news, and it would tell, your doctors could send an email to it and it would say like, "Have you taken your meds?" And you just click yes or no.
Hmm.
So it was like the most user-friendly smartwatch because it was made for people with Alzheimer's. But it was really cool. We got to test out all the technology as kids. So Ireland um, has a fraction of Intel there, and they set up basically a neighborhood to
Mhm.
test the systems in. So we moved there to do that. It was supposed to be for a summer, and then we extended for a year, and then it kept growing and growing until finally we were there for quite a while. But it was, yeah, for my dad's work.
That's awesome. And so when you came back, like was it at all hard to come back to the US?
Well, we came back to Tennessee, and I had previously in the United States lived in Oregon, which Oregon and Ireland are really similar.
Hmm.
Um, in at least like the weather is
Hmm.
pretty much the same, and uh, a lot of there's a lot of like cultural things, like walking slanted with your head down because of the rain. So I kind of understood those things, and moving to Tennessee was like a huge culture shock. First of
Hmm.
all, the people were just larger. Like, I don't know if it's like the hormones in the milk or what, but like everyone was really, I hadn't seen that many large people. And I'd gone to school with high schoolers like in Ireland, and I was like, wow, these Americans are huge. So that was kind of a trip. And we moved in 2008. So it was like in the middle of the Obama election.
Mhm.
And that was not, well, it was a place, Tennessee was a place to be that year. That I was me and my choir director that were pro Obama, and
Mhm.
the rest of the 2000 child school was. So that was kind of a trip too. In Ireland, my fifth and sixth grade classes were in the same room because
Mm.
there was only 10 kids in each class. So one
Mm.
teacher with all of us. And then going to Tennessee, where all of the seventh grade class was, there was like just under 1,000 seventh graders at the school. So you're like broken up and your classes are like 40 people. And that was really like, whoa.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. What part of Tennessee were you in?
In Knoxville and Farragut.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my mom's from Chattanooga, so
Oh, cool.
I have some familiarity with Tennessee. Um, do you think you picked up any musical influences while you were in Tennessee?
That was one of the cool things from Ireland to Tennessee is I started violin before we moved to Ireland. And so I took fiddle in Ireland, and it was in Oregon, it was like really proper, like learning, reading music to violin. In Ireland, it was all by ear. So it
Mhm.
was like, listen to this and play it back. And there was no, like, nobody told you where to put your fingers really. It was just like, oh, listen, feel it, instinctual. And
Mm.
that's all about that. Like, our choir was the same way. It's just like, oh, you listen to it, you hear it. Like it wasn't very much about reading music.
Mm.
And then going to Tennessee, took fiddle lessons, and they did the same thing where it was all about listening. And so that was really cool. To this day, I'm like really bad at like playing music on the violin when I see it. But if I listen to it, it's a lot easier because I'm like more comfortable with that style.
See, I love that. And I love that you're talking about this because this is actually a thing that I'm really, really interested in because I'm the opposite. Like as soon as I learned to play the piano, my piano teacher started teaching me how to read notes. So I think I read better than I play by ear. But in my opinion, I think it's more, I don't want to say better, but like, you talked about, they were saying, oh, listen, feel it. Like, I think that's a more common way that people learn. Does that make any
Yeah,
sense?
it's like more instinctual, you know?
Exactly.
And like the music, like the written helps facilitate, like with my dad, he couldn't just hear it. And so, and he does sensors and a lot of math. So like the written was the way he learned how to play guitar, which is really weird for guitar. Usually it's, especially for guitar, by ear.
Right.
And but his was all learning the math of the guitar. And once
Mm.
he figured out how like scales worked and how he could use those different, basically insert equations into songs, he got really good at guitar. And now like people are like, oh my gosh, I would have never believed that he's tone deaf if you told me, because he just improvised an entire solo. And I'm like, it's just math. It's not because he knows how it sounds or what it means. It's just he knows the math, and he's like pretty good at math. So like I think though, to be any really good musician has a bit of both, right? Like you need to be able to feel it and hear it, and also know where things should go, or like, because even when they shouldn't go there, it's intentional. Like,
Hmm.
so I like in violin, I'm better by ear, but like on piano or like singing, I prefer the written out, because it's, especially with singing, it's hard to, because what you hear is different than what you say.
Oh, definitely. And especially with, I guess with singing, it's your voice. So you don't necessarily have a physical reference for like, no, I am in the key of A flat. Whereas like on the piano, you're like, oh, like there's my, that
I
was
mean,
not an A flat, by the way.
yeah,
But yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool though, that was how you learned fiddle. I didn't realize you play fiddle.
not very well, mind. Especially now, I haven't practiced in a while. The first We actually, the Grey Cats got their first gig before you joined in March 2020.
Mhm.
And it was like we got the gig and got paid for it before the pandemic happened. And then the
Mhm.
pandemic happened and it was canceled. But they let us keep the money as like a cancellation fee. And I
Mm.
bought a new violin so that I can actually play, hopefully. I don't practice as much as I'd like to, but
Who
well,
does?
yeah.
Right? It's not easy to in this world to make time for that. But I wanted to ask, so I know you now I've learned you play fiddle, you play guitar, and you also sing in Spanish. And so I was curious about like how you learned that and how you got interested in that particular style of music. The what is it, Mariachi Flor de Toloache,
Yeah.
the song that you play a lot. Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I learned Spanish as a first language when I was little, because my dad learned Spanish in the army as part of, he was in the US Army and during the Cold War. And so part of that whole like, let's fight the Cold War in Latin America, my
Mhm.
dad was going to be one of those troops, but ended up not, but he learned Spanish.
Mhm.
And also, though, he was a graduate student. So, like, he was talking about psychology and Noam Chomsky language acquisition theories, which is like when, like, it's not just Noam Chomsky, there's other people, but basically, like, you know, one language, this is how the pathways in your brain are set up. But if you know two, then you have more pathways because there's different languages interpret things in different ways. So
Hmm.
you're like making more neural connections if you're raised bilingually. It's like within certain months when your language apprehension. Anyways, that's why my dad was like, "Oh, she needs to learn Spanish," because I was the firstborn, so I was like kind of the test child too. But they really, so I had like Guatemalan nannies when I was really little because both my parents were in school or working, and so it was just like always Spanish and English growing up. And so learning it as a kid, like in school, obviously we didn't speak it at home like after I was 5. So I didn't have any exposure until I went to like Spanish classes in the 3rd grade. And then it came back so quick. It was like my best subject and I didn't understand why. And my dad was like, "Oh, you've been speaking this language your whole life." And I'm like, have I? I don't think so. But it kind of like, because I had that exposure, it made it easier as I got older. And so in college, I did a history major with an emphasis on Latin America during the Cold War. And we had really good classes I went to University of Oregon, and there was like a whole program where it was called the Heritage Program. And it was for like bilingual people who were raised bilingual. And it basically explored like in from a bunch of different perspectives, like what it is to be like Latin American in the United States.
Hmm.
And so studying the Cold War alongside those classes was like an invaluable education because I was able to get like a lot of the stories and also a lot of like make a lot of friends who were kind of, whereas my dad was the one who was going to be the ones forcing their parents to leave, like kind of round out my perception of the whole era. So it was really like devastating things to be learning, but really necessary things to understand like our culture and like also especially in the era of Trump, like all of those immigration border wall stuff. Like so I studied abroad in Querétaro, Mexico, and I was like, I'm the kind of person that is maybe plays with my safety a little too hard sometimes. And like, as a single female, probably you should not go out alone to bars in the middle of Mexico. But I was like, I want to make friends who are like local, and I don't really know what to do except listen to music and drink. So I'll just go somewhere where that's happening. And I made friends with a trombone player who was like, "Oh, I'm in a bunch of bands. Like, you're a musician. That's really cool. Like, come listen to what I do." And it was so neat to see, like, he would play in the mornings and like it wasn't, I wouldn't call it jazz, but it was more like an upbeat jazz, like all the instruments were talking together like a freestyle jam kind of. And then go to play cumbia music, like modernized cumbia, not like traditional so much, but it was like cumbia slash rock music. and then go to like play a classical jazz at like a really upscale restaurant, and then go play covers of classic rock at night, all in one day. And I was like, is this what being a musician is? This is amazing. Like I had never had that kind of perspective. And so through that connection and the connections I made as a result, like it really exposed me to a lot of really cool music that I hadn't been so familiar with. Like I'd taken some classes on polyrhythms, and I'd been really interested in that, and especially like in African dance classes. I'd done a lot of those because the rhythms was something that was difficult to me, so it was really interesting. And then of course, like cumbias have play with a lot of different kind of polyrhythms and like different sounds, and so I liked learning about those and like kind of getting that firsthand music education, for a better way, lack of a better way of saying it. But that was where I was really introduced to it. So then when I came back after studying abroad, I just was trying to find different influences of that here. And Mariachi Flor de Toloache is a band from New York that's an all-female mariachi band. Mariachi, like loosely, they play other styles of music too, but they're really good. They started playing at bars, and they usually play at bars, but they came to Eugene, Oregon, and like that's a really like white place, and I don't know why. For some reason though, they were scheduled at like the symphony orchestra hall, where like only like I would imagine seeing like Esperanza Spalding there, but I would not. I expected this other band to play like a place where they served alcohol, you know, like a more of like a dancey type vibe where you could dance, and like this concert hall you could not dance. But it was really cute because the Springfield and Eugene are right next to each other, and so the Springfield High School had a mariachi band as part of their high school, and they opened for Mariachi Flor de Toloache, and all the parents were there. And so you still had that warmness of like you would in a bar where everyone's dancing, but it was from the families. And so that was a really cute way to see them.
No, I love it. And it's funny you mentioned that, because when I saw them at the Balboa Theater here in San Diego, and it was them, and then it was Mextracy, which is like all of these like really big name Mexican rock musicians playing Morrissey covers in Spanish. They were great. And then La Santa Cecilia was the last one. And so those are all bands that like, they wanted everyone to dance, but like, it's the Balboa Theater, like it's full of seats. Like, where are you going to dance? You know what I mean? So it's funny that you mentioned that, because they like all of them were so frustrated that whole night that we weren't dancing, and it was like, oh, but this isn't the right venue.
Yeah, it's like you want to dance, but there's no space.
Exactly. I mean, I thought about like, I was there again, talk about like single white female alone. Like I was there alone, and I thought about just like doing it, but I just, you know what I mean? I was like, no, like I do not want to be that guy tonight. Like I just don't, you know?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. And it puts you in that awkward situation where you're like, am I going to be the only one dancing? Will other people, am I a trendsetter? Like,
right, exactly. But anyway, no, I was really impressed with them. So that's why I was really happy the first time I heard you do that cover. I was like, yay.
I love their songs because they're very vocally challenging, but not very like chord challenging, or they can be simplified, rather is a better way of saying it, because they are pretty challenging, but they can be simplified pretty easily. And so I like covering their songs because I'm like, oh, I'm really talented here, but I'm not as talented on the guitar.
Hey, whatever works, right?
Yeah, it's playing to your strengths. Right?
That's it. Exactly. So, okay. So you got the, guitar from an early age, you got the choir in Ireland. And just real quick, you told me kind of some interesting things about choirs in Ireland.
Yeah. So there's, well, at least when I was in school there, they have a national children's choir. And so all the public schools have like I think we had like maybe 10 girls from all the grades in our school in this choir. And we thought that was a pretty big choir. Some only have 5 or 6. And so then like, I think it was like the top 3 or 5 of our choir went to like the national choir, and there was either 2 or 3 like rehearsals we did with the whole national choir, and it was in Dublin, and then we performed at the National Concert Hall, like the whole choir. It took up like, we were up in the corner balcony, but it was really cute. And it was kind of, I didn't realize until I lived there. I mean, I guess also I was pretty young. I like to think I was a pretty like with it little kid, but it surprised me that Ireland was like super into disco. Like instead of like dance clubs, there's still a lot of like discos. Like you go into the disco, and in the early 2000s, I was like, okay, I thought we were done with this, but cool, glad it's still a thing. So like in choir, we did like some ABBA and like kind of some songs that I was not really expecting out of a choir, and definitely haven't heard since in a children's choir. But it was fun to have that. And then we also did songs in Irish, because it's the Irish National Children's Choir, you have to. So one of the songs we did was on Pucker Willa, which was one of the ones that we were going to do with
That's the goat one.
Yeah. It means the mad puck goat. When Cromwell's army invaded Ireland, I guess they went over this hill and there was a bunch of goats on the hill, and the army startled the goats. And so one of them ran into the town and alerted all the townspeople that something was amiss up on the hill. So they all hid, and it saved that town's life. The goat that ran through and warned them. So they now have a festival every year. I wish I could remember the name of the town, but that celebrates the mad puck goat. And so the song is part of that like history and tradition of the goat saving the town. It's like the joys of living in Ireland. Like we went to the supermarket, and there was this huge stone. Like this is a medium. It was like probably 6 feet across, giant circle stone. And one day, like we asked our friends they lived in the area forever and their family was from there. And we were like, hey, what's that stone about? There's like a whole garden around it. It's kind of weird, just like this random stone. It used to be a base for something, like a cross. They have the big Celtic crosses. And they're like, no, that's the old beheading stone. And we were like, what? They're like, oh yeah, that's where the king was beheaded. His head's over there. His body's over there. That big hill in the middle of the suburb that's just outside of town? Yeah, his body is buried upside down in the mound. That's just like, it's just a park. Like you would not know, because there's no plaque or anything. It's just this giant hill that looks really overgrown, and it's kind of, you think maybe they have bad maintenance because it's overgrown, but it's no, because if you trim it too much, you might hit the old king's bones, and you don't want to disturb him in his rest.
Wow. Wow. See, that's like things, living in America, I mean, there are things like that here. We just don't know about them.
We'd have to face that we basically committed a genocide. I mean, especially in California, if you Google California genocide, like listeners, you'll learn all about it. It's a real thing. Yeah, so like, it's kind of there. So there are stories here, especially in San Diego. There's a book, Dana Point.
Richard Henry Dana. Are you talking about 2 years before the Mass?
I am.
I'm obsessed with that book.
Oh, cool. Me too. I've listened to the audiobook like 3 times. But he talked about the natives, like, and how they had their like little hideaway too. Also, there's like a super ancient law in city of San Diego that's no longer in effect, but was in effect way longer than it should have been, like into the 60s or something, that natives could be prosecuted if they were loitering in the city of San Diego, which was really supported their like original, I guess, drive of work or get out. But yeah, it should be talked about more, and it's really not. Especially in San Diego, we have the most tribes of any county in the United States.
Facts, yes.
But like nobody here they're like, oh, you mean the one that owns the casino? And I'm like, oh, you mean the like 5 or 6 that own casinos plus, and then plus all of the other ones that own a bunch of others still like income driven things. And even the ones that don't, like, they're still part of this county's heritage and like traditions and should be included.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And like we have, so like there's Old Town, and I've gone down there. It was, I don't know, probably more than 10 years ago, and like looked at all the exhibits and all those things. And like, it's really interesting. And there's some really interesting things. And I think when I was in like fourth grade, in fourth grade, we do California history, but it's like the happy smiling California history. Like they don't talk about, the stuff we're talking about right now. Right. And so we went to Old Town, and all I remember about it is that this lady made me wear a doily on my head because I was supposed to be like this one woman. And I was like I wouldn't wear anything like girly until I was like 17 years old. So here I am in my like baggy jeans and my baggy shirt with this like doily on my head, and I wanted to die. Okay, so that's all I remember about Old Town, right? But I wish that we learned, and like you said, we have to confront really ugly things to talk about this, right? But I wish that we would, because there's a lot of that here. Like there's this gal who does this thing, Hidden San Diego. And have you seen that at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all over Instagram, right? But she made like a coffee table book, and it talked about a lot of these graveyards that, like, there's one in Poway, or maybe it's San Marcos, and it's like they built the road right through the graveyard, and the only indication that there was ever a graveyard there is there's like a little marker like in the middle of the median of the super busy street that's like,
oh my gosh,
graveyard. Like
wow.
stuff like that is really important. So that's cool that the Irish recognize that.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Like, man, I mean, I'm sure it was in a different time, doesn't excuse it, but like, who builds a road through a graveyard?
Oh.
Like, I know we've done a lot worse to native lands, like mercury mining and things like that in the middle of graveyards. Sorry, Arizona, but there's definitely like, yeah, every time it shocks me. Like, it doesn't matter how much I know about it, like just the callousness of people sucks.
Have you been to Pioneer Park in so like where they freaking like build a park over a graveyard, and then they take all the stones and they like line them up.
Move it in the corner. Yeah.
Like, really, guys?
Like, at least like fruit trees, plant fruit trees. It's there so we can taste the delicious nutrients of our ancestors. That's what they do in Oregon. Like, there's a pioneer cemetery in Eugene, and they have a bunch of like pear trees and like different fruit trees all around the edge. So in the summer we'd go just like little hoodlums and like go take all the fruit from the cemetery, because I mean, it was free, it was legal, but got to make sure I check in my legality. But it was the best fruit because it had all the nutrients from all the bodies.
Whatever it takes, right?
Some people like get really shocked and they're like, oh my gosh, how could you eat? But it's like, it's been processed through the tree. It's really like the best way to respect their life. I mean, I guess we could let it rot into the ground and just keep going, but
right? I mean, when I'm dead, somebody damn well better eat a tree and eat the pears that I'm fertilizing. Then I'm going to feel like my death was really for something.
It would be the most delicious pears. Totally worth it.
All right. Well, we know what, we know what I'm going to put in my will. So as we were talking about these various things, you kind of brought up law a couple times. So another interesting fact about you is that you are a lawyer. So like, tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm a lawyer. So part of being in Ireland, especially during the like Bush to Obama transition, we definitely learned a lot about politics, and my dad was really interested in Irish politics too, so we went to like a Sinn Féin rally, and definitely
Wait, tell me about them. Are they the nationalists, or who are they?
Yeah, they're more nationalist than other groups, but okay. uh, my dad's my dad's party in Ireland, I guess, if he could have voted, but he didn't. But he always like supported their cause. So we went to one of their rallies, and of course my brother like had to make a scene, and my dad was trying not, there was cameras there, but he was like, oh, we'll stand in the back, it'll be fine, because he was there representing Intel. I mean, not at the event representing Intel, but in Ireland. And of course the cameras go right to us because my brother's like making a fuss and like talking back to the speaker and stuff. And my dad was mortified. All his coworkers were like, oh, you're really embracing the culture, huh? Going to political rallies. So when I was in high school, I was the president of our high school's Amnesty International, which is a human rights group, basically started by a British guy by writing letters. And their whole thing is to like help people being wrongly persecuted by their governments. And it has a lot of like ties with Ireland and the whole persecution, wrongly persecuted thing. So, and I had a lot of really I was really fat in high school, but I had a lot of really attractive friends. So I convinced them to help us recruit people. So we had the largest club in the school. It was larger than Key Club for like 2 years in a row. But it was only because my friends, like I had two hot girls in short shorts yelling about Pussy Riot on a table, and all of the teenage boys were like, oh, hell yeah, sign me up. And it was, but still a large number of them stayed because they were like, oh, people are being put into camps because they're playing music on buses. That is messed up. I definitely want to do something about this. So it was really fun. We got to organize a bunch of different events and letter writes and did some panels and stuff. And then I tried to go to music school for college, but I didn't have enough opera experience. So I instead went for journalism. And then I got an article published my first year of undergraduate for sailing to Canada with my dad. So I was like, but in Cruising Outpost, and the editor is Bob Bitchin. That's his legal name. And it's my dad's hero. And so I got to write a letter to Bob Bitchin asking him to publish my article, and got a check from Bob Bitchin. My dad was so proud. It was like I'd made it at that point. And so I was like, well, this is dumb. I don't want to pay, another 25 grand just to get a degree in something I've already done, to get a degree so I can publish articles. So I instead went for history, because then I was like, oh, okay, then I can at least use the knowledge somehow. So that's how I got there. But then I got to graduation, and what do you do with a history degree? And as much as I would love to get my PhD in history still on my bucket list, a more lucrative next move was law school. And also law schools are and were and still kind of are very desperate for people. So you pretty much just had to like give 1 ounce of effort and you could get a full ride.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, I had a 3.5 GPA, so it wasn't like the best, but it wasn't bad. And so with a 3.5 GPA, and I studied for a couple of weeks for the LSAT. It wasn't a great LSAT score, but it was like a 3.5 LSAT score. Like it was medium. And I got, of the 9 schools I applied to, 6 of them offered me free rides. Like they were really desperate. But the thing with law school is you get free ride only if you maintain a certain grade point average. So I ended up getting most of it covered through scholarships, but I still have like $150,000 worth of debt from law school. So yeah, I went to law school because I wanted to be able to make it, because like you can only do so much writing letters and writing articles, but you can do a lot more if you're actually what is it, like be in the system to beat the system or something like that. So I was like, okay, cool. So I was wanting to do immigration, mostly because a lot of people I worked with had been really abused because of their immigration status. And I was like, that shouldn't be a thing. Like that's, you have a human right to get paid for your work and like have reasonable living conditions, and like that shouldn't change just because of your status. So I initially wanted to do that. I wrote a thesis paper about Trump era immigration policies, but I realized there's a whole lot of subjectivity in immigration law. It's very much like the judge's thoughts on the matter. And so I was like, I'm not that convincing though, like I don't think I would be the best advocate in that way, because like I'm not a great salesperson, but I am good at like judging the fairness of things. And so and like reaching like honest and good deals, and like people believe me that I'm honest. But sometimes, especially when you're not sure if your client's telling the truth because you cannot understand fully what they're saying, like I don't think I'd be the best advocate in that role. But especially I realized a lot of the concerns that I had seen were in the labor environment and how people are getting abused for their wages. And so I found a job at a labor law firm that does plaintiffs work, so we don't charge our clients anything ever. Thank you, state of California, for those attorneys' fees. It's not even contingency. The other side just totally has to pay us. And it's really nice to like be able to like, it's not pro bono because I still get paid, but it's also, it feels like pro bono because I'm able to help anyone I want. So yeah, that's how I ended up in law. And it's nice too for like my musician friends to be able to help them protect their music and protect my own music, and like knowing the ins and outs of, everybody needs a friend who's a lawyer.
Wow, yeah, I think that's especially true in this society, since we are so litigious.
Yeah, one thing that I especially in Ireland, I grew up like really disliking George Bush, and as I studied law a lot more, I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe he wasn't all bad. One thing that under his administration, they redid a lot of the rules to make them more like understandable to the layman, like the rules of evidence, the federal rules of evidence were redone under Bush. And now they're like, I mean, like I could give you my federal rule book for the evidence code and you could read it and understand it, which is pretty cool. Because before, I mean, if you read the California evidence code, it's like, hereby, wherefore, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of just jargon that doesn't need to be there, but the federal rules are just like so clear cut.
Wow.
Still have a lot of like meaning behind them. You definitely couldn't like read them and go argue in court, but like you could read them and understand them, which is more than you could do for California. So
yeah, I think our state is not exactly known for being efficient.
Yeah, we supposedly want to be like the litigation hub of the world. Like that was in a California case I read recently. They're like, we want people to litigate here, but then like our laws are really not that well. They're not very clear cut. Like they have a lot of unnecessary, just outdated jargon. But you know, there's a lot of laws too that need to be written still. So I guess one thing at a time.
For sure, one thing at a time. So I like, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is like, so how does your music and your law, like, are they connected? Do you see a connection there? And it sounds like at least a little bit, you know, in terms of what you said about copyright law.
Yeah, and like helping people set up businesses like to run their music through, and yeah, I'm trying to think of how else. The contracts definitely for like cancellation clauses is something I'm so bad at, but like, because I'm, like I said, I'm not a salesperson, so I'm not good at getting people to sign contracts when I've just made a deal with them. And that's like something as musicians need, like as far as legal protection, like as soon as they can get a contract signed, they need to get a contract signed, because I just like personally have had so many people, like 3 large gigs in the last few months, especially with COVID, cancel. And like I've spent a lot of time, like one of the gigs we spent almost 300 hours like preparing for this gig and like planning it, and then it canceled the week before and we didn't have a cancellation clause. So we're just kind of SOL because we didn't do anything, and like even legally there's really no argument there. And if we just had a contract, I'm like, oh, this is my one job.
Well, that's a good lesson, actually. And I will tell you that in music school, they don't tell you anything about all of the things that you just talked about. I mean, even when I started teaching private lessons, I had to write up like a student agreement. And granted, like I would never take a student to small claims court or anything like that. But like, just having things in writing, I think is really, really important. And especially like I had a lawyer friend who had this like karaoke band, and he had like a contract with the club where they were playing about like how much they were going to get paid and all these things. And I'm just like, man, that is so important. But anytime, as the child of two attorneys, to me it seems like anytime I speak up about stuff like that, people are like, oh, shut up, you're being annoying.
Well, and especially in music, it's supposed to be all like free love and like, oh, you don't really own your music. Like, why can't you just give it to the world? Like, oh, it's chill, we're just jamming. But like that, I mean, that's how it is. Like, you never think there's going to be a lawsuit, but then later down the road, you're like, oh, dang, I wish I had that. Like, and there's so many stories, like, I'm sure we could name like 20 without thinking, of musicians that have been screwed out of their royalties and their rights to their music because they've just been taken advantage of and didn't think at the time it was going to be a big deal. So they don't read their contracts or don't have a contract or don't have anything in place that they can prove, oh no, this is what the agreement was. Or like, and it's the law favors, because it's supposedly they're sophisticated parties, because you have, I guess, like you're supposed to have like the ability to, as a professional musician, you should be accustomed to those contracts. But like you said, nobody teaches you how to read those contracts or how to write them or what to look for.
Right. That would be, if you were ever like, I want to make a buck, maybe something you could do is you could make like an online course for musicians and like
How to
contract law for musicians. Like, that'd be super sweet.
I'm sure there are a couple out there, but I would be happy to just do it for free too. If you want to do a mini side series in your podcast, maybe we can work on that together.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I think that'd be super cool, actually. Wow. Yeah. Hey, okay. Well, these are the cool things that happen when I have cool people on my podcast, because I never would have thought of that. Yeah. Speaking though of you were talking about your music earlier and protecting your music. I think I've been before to your SoundCloud. Are there places online where people can hear your music?
Yeah, well, yes, but maybe that's not the best way to hear my music.
What's the best way? How do you want to be heard?
It's all quite dated online. It's there, but it's really old. So I'm sorry if it is really bad, listeners. But I think my YouTube is just Kat Dishongh. I know if you search Kat Dishongh in YouTube, there's only 2 Catherine Dishonghs in the United States, and one is an old lady in Little Rock, Arkansas. So not that one. But I'm pretty easy to find online, which is a good thing and a bad thing. The SoundCloud is Kat Dish Music. Save people the struggle of, there's a hyphen. So Kat dash dish dash music.
Okay, and I'll put links so that people can find it when when I make my little blog post for this. Okay, cool. And so, but you said that's not the best way to hear you. Is the best way to hear you live?
Yes, that's the best way. Definitely the most current way. Everyone, especially like female voices though, they really like flower. They really come into bloom in, that's the only analogy I got, when I feel like ladies are in their late 20s. Mm-hmm. And so like my voice at 2021, which is when most of my online stuff was recorded, is a lot different than it is now, just because my voice has matured a lot, and my range is different. So there's stuff there, but live is the best way to hear any musician, I think, or any musician worth listening to.
Listen to you.
I know, talking some big game for someone with 0 albums and
you know what? That's okay. I think you've done enough things to earn some big game talk.
At least I can speak to the legal side.
There you go. And I feel like anyone who's been to it, what was the name? Sinn Féin? What's the name of the party?
Oh, yeah, Sinn Féin rally.
Yeah, anyone who's been to a Sinn Féin rally, I think, can talk some smack. I think that's okay.
Well, we can, but that's probably more dangerous than helpful.
Oh, okay, well, fair enough. Fair enough. So anyways, thank you so much for hanging out with me. And I thought I was going to release this on St. Patrick's Day. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll release it before our gig to like promote our gig. I don't know when I'll release it, but I will release it and it will be awesome. So
Thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to finally be a participant in one of my favorite podcasts. Except I just watch the videos because I like seeing the faces, but still an excellent program. I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
absolutely. And you're coming back to talk about contracts, right?
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. I'm totally down to do like a mini series on things you should do to be better as a musician legally.
Awesome. All right. Well, then I will see you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Catherine.
Bye.